Hi, Lauren. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
How are you guys?
I'm good.
Thank you
Good.
for being here. The very first one I did, I was panicking because there was like nobody here at, like 5 minutes till, and I'm logged in, ready to go. And then like everybody showed up like right at 6. So I guess that's the new habit with Zoom is everybody shows up right on time. Nobody gets there early because I guess you don't want to just like stare at somebody's face. Hey, Mackenzie, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. So good evening, everybody. My computer says 6 o'clock. I'm probably going to wait just a minute or two to see if we have anybody else show up like that. So I'm just going to, I realize what time it is. I'm just going to kind of hold off for just another minute before we get started. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Story Pedley. I am one of the academic advisors in the College of Pharmacy, and I want to start out tonight by saying thank you. Thank you for being here in this crazy time when there are a million things going on in your lives. You chose to spend some time with us tonight, and that means a lot, and we really, truly appreciate it. I wish we could be in person, but this format tends to be nice in that you don't have to come to campus, especially if you live far away. So that is one nice option for this, though I do wish we could be in person and have a meal together and sit down and chat. But just a few housekeeping items and then we'll go ahead and get started. I want to let everybody know we are recording this. We will then post it on our website. But the only thing that will show are the presenters. So your faces will not show. It'll just be the presenters and then the content of that video. So that will be available probably by the end of the week, if not early next week on our website. And you can search for it on the Purdue Pharmacy website by just searching for virtual, and you'll see a link to all of our recordings. I have another advisor here with me to help answer questions. So if you guys do have questions, there are a couple of options. You can put your question in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question, raise your hand, whatever you need to do. That is not going to interrupt us. I feel like we all have a pretty casual presentation style, and we really want to make sure that we're talking about what you think is important. So as questions come up, please jump in and ask. Kind of along those same lines, if anybody is brave enough to turn your cameras on, it's always nice to talk to a face instead of a black screen. So that would be much appreciated if you guys feel comfortable doing that. We will keep our cameras on the whole time. And one last thing I wanted to mention that I just learned this new trick. Before you log off, if you notice that there are lots of really good questions coming in the chat, and what we'll do is we'll try to answer those out loud. But if we don't get to all of them, Mrs. Eberhard, who is our other advisor here, is going to be posting answers and putting links in the chat to give you additional information. So before you log off, if there's really good information in the chat, at the very bottom, there's 3 little dots on the chat box. If you click that, an option is to save the chat. So that allows you to keep all that information that you just learned and refer back to it later. Okay, so like I said, my name is Story Pedley, and I will be kind of hosting tonight. I'm going to ask Mrs. Eberhard to introduce herself, and then I'll have the students. We have students here too. I know you want to hear from them way more than you want to hear from me. So I'll ask Mrs. Eberhard to introduce herself first.
Hi everyone, my name is Megan Eberhard. I'm one of the academic advisors in the office. One of the other things that I do is I work with our living learning community students. So for any of you that have heard information about the learning community and you have questions, I'm happy to answer those questions for you. So thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. So we have 3 current students with us, and they are really going to spend the majority of time talking about their perspectives, their experiences, advice they have for you. So what I'm going to ask them to do is first introduce themselves. And when you guys introduce yourself, if you don't mind, share your name, share where you're from, and then talk briefly about why you chose pharmacy and why you chose Purdue. And I'll just have you guys go what's the order in my screen. And so I have Liz, and then Lauren, and then Mackenzie.
Hi everyone, I'm Liz. I chose pharmacy because I knew that I wanted to go into the healthcare field, and I actually toured Purdue, and I met with a Purdue pharmacy ambassador when I was in high school, and I really wasn't interested in going into pharmacy at all. My parents actually was like, "Hey, you should go do this information session," and I was like, "Okay, fine." Didn't really think I'd be interested. And they talked to me, and I realized that this was actually something that I would like more than going to medical school, just because of the content and the material that you learn and apply. I'm from Frankfort, Indiana, which is about 45 minutes south from Purdue. And ultimately, I chose Purdue, one, because I'm a Lilly Scholar and I needed to go to an Indiana college to use that. And then I also, once I was interested in pharmacy, I learned that they had a really good pharmacy program. So for me, it just kind of all lined up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Michael. I'm a sophomore. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. So I chose pharmacy because I have a brother who actually has diabetes type 1. So we actually spent a lot of time in the pharmacy, and I knew I had a passion for helping others. So that was kind of the way I wanted to do it. I was very passionate about that. And the reason I chose Purdue is because I really fell in love with the campus when I toured it. And I felt like the environment was fit for me. And not only that, but they had an amazing pharmacy program. So I was definitely curious, and a couple of people I spoke to, including a couple pharmacy ambassadors and people in OSS in the pharmacy building, they really spoke highly of the program and spoke highly of Purdue. So it drew me to it. And so now I'm here.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie. My circumstance is kind of weird. I'm what you call a PP3, which is
Will you
pre-pharmacy.
explain like what PP means?
Yeah, so PP is pre-pharmacy and P is pharmacy. So when you're in the professional program, you're like a P1, P year 1, P year 2, P3, etc. And then usually you do 2 years of pre-pharmacy, but I wanted to finish my minor, so I didn't apply last year. So now I'm kind of like in a hybrid between professional classes and undergrad classes. It's kind of strange, but it worked. I am from Indianapolis, Indiana. I've actually wanted to be a pharmacist since I was 7, which sounds really absurd. But my uncle was diagnosed with esophageal cancer when I was 7, and we were in the hospital with him a lot. And for some reason, I just like really loved his pharmacist. I think I just like, was the 7-year-old girl who like wanted to hold her hand and walk along. But um, then I was like the 7-year-old saying, "Oh, I'm going to be a pharmacist when I grow up." But then when I got to like high school, I really liked science, and so I started shadowing some and knew that that's what I wanted to do. I chose Purdue actually for a few reasons. One, it was a lot cheaper than some private schools that I was looking into. Two, there's so many opportunities here, like through professors. I mean, like my professors write my textbooks. They do great research things, and Purdue is very well known. And I really liked that. I didn't like the idea of a big school actually, but what drew me to it was actually Purdue Pharmacy Ambassadors telling me that the College of Pharmacy was such like a small, close-knit family, and I really liked that. So that's why I chose here, and I don't regret it.
Awesome. Thanks, all three of you. So I think Mackenzie made a really interesting point that we hear quite a bit, is that you can make a big university feel small, like what Mackenzie was talking about. Like the College of Pharmacy itself is really pretty tight knit, but you can't really make a small college bigger. So you kind of get the best of both worlds when you come to Purdue in pharmacy. And then Liz mentioned something really interesting that I hear often from students is a lot of times I'll hear students say, I was really struggling to decide between pharmacy and med school. And we see that a lot. And in my experience, what I have seen draw students to pharmacy is at Purdue, you can graduate in 6 years with a doctorate degree. So you would be Dr. Smith, Dr. Jones after 6 years, unlike med school, which would be at minimum 8, but then residency and all of that other stuff. Also, the draw to pharmacy is it's really very clean. You don't even really have to touch people unless you're giving an immunization or something. And that really attracts a lot of people that maybe don't want the blood and guts and bodily fluids of med school. And rarely is a pharmacist going to get a 3 a.m. emergency phone call to come into the ER unless you're an ER pharmacist. So there are definitely some benefits to doing pharmacy at Purdue, and that does tend to draw a lot of students. Plus our program is 6 years, so it's called a 2+4, 2 years of pre-pharmacy plus 4 years of pharmacy school. There are a lot of pharmacy schools that require you to have an undergraduate degree first. So at Purdue, you are out 2 years earlier, 2 years less of tuition, and 2 years more of an income. And then in addition to our PharmD program, the other major that we offer is called BSPS, and that stands for Bachelor of Science in Pharmaceutical Sciences. So the PharmD path tends to be very patient focused. The BSPS path tends to be a little more research focused. So the BSPS tends to be more on drug discovery and drug development. So maybe you're thinking you want to be the person to cure cancer or cure Alzheimer's. You want to take a current drug and make it work faster, make it less painful, make it less expensive. So really that drug discovery and drug discovery and drug development component. So that does tend to have a little more of a research base, and those students tend to work maybe in clinical trials or work in a research lab or maybe pharmaceutical sales right out of college. It's also a really good stepping stone to medical school, graduate school, dental, optometry, a lot of those professional programs. So I'm gonna pass it back to the students. And if I could ask you guys to maybe talk a little bit about your favorite class right now and maybe your most challenging class.
So I'm going to start off with my most challenging class right now. I'm a P1, so this is my first full year in the professional program. So one of the classes that you start in the spring of your first year is called therapeutics, and it is a 6 credit hour course. So you go to class for 2 hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you're really integrating clinical cases, patient cases. You're integrating molecular pharmacology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physiology. So it's just a class that's really intensive with the material. You have things that you really need to work through, like just like study. You got to work through it to understand it. And there's also stuff that you have to memorize. So it's just a class that's very much, it's just a big class. It's just a big, difficult class. That's not to say it's not rewarding, especially when you do better on an exam than you thought you would. But really, the first semester of taking that class is just a huge learning curve on how to study. And that's the main reason why it's difficult. Not necessarily the material is super, super difficult the first semester. It's just learning how to study it and learning how to compile it all in your brain in a way that you can recall it down the road. The class that
Lizzie, can I interrupt for just a second? Before you go on, can you talk a little bit about the lab component of that class?
I don't have a lab component.
So
right
like, I
now.
guess what I mean is like, for example, if you learn in therapeutics about diabetes or asthma, then there's typically, and maybe this will start next year, there's a lab component that goes with it where you then learn, how do I talk to a patient that has asthma? Or how do I teach them to use an inhaler? So there's a patient component that goes with that class. So you're not only are you learning the medicinal makeup and the chemistry of the drugs and how they work in the body and why they would take that drug, you then learn how to talk to a patient about it, how to talk about dosing and those types of things.
Oh, like the professional lab.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Those classes tend to overlap in material. So what you're learning in therapeutics is then just further reiterated in a lab that you take on another day. So yeah, we just finished our pulmonary module. So we learned about asthma inhalers, COPD inhalers, medications, different beta blockers. So in lab then, the following week, we had to practice counseling a patient on how to use their inhaler, learn about how we would change the way we talked to patients if it was, a little kid getting an inhaler versus an adult, and explaining side effects. And then like also kind of getting a little bit into dosing regimens. So yeah, that is, it's not under the same class name, but they do mirror each other. So yeah, you're not just like told all these facts and then not told how to apply them. You very much learn how to apply them in lab. That's kind of where your patient cases come to life. And then the class that I am liking the most this semester is pharmacokinetics. So basically, what the drug is doing inside the body, what the body is doing to the drug. We go over absorption of drug, metabolism of drug, and so on in that class. It is a lot of math, but they walk you through the equations, and I've just found that I find it really interesting how an ionization state or the weight, the molecular weight of a drug affects how it gets through the body. So I'm really enjoying that class right now.
Thanks, Liz.
All right, so I'm going to start with my most challenging class, and I would say it's biochemistry. So basically in biochemistry, we learn about a lot of metabolism of different chemicals going through the body, such as the Krebs cycle or glycolysis, gluconeogenesis. So as of now, we're learning about the Krebs cycle and how pyruvate is converted into different things that we need for our body and into different metabolites. So I think it really goes into depth as far as the reactions and learning who's giving electrons to who's gaining protons. It's very specific, but once you get into it, you start to get the hang of it and how to study for it. It's definitely something that involves a lot of memory, and it's very intense in terms of learning the processes since they're all so detailed, but we also learn the integration of it, which makes it applicable to real life. and which makes it an amazing class, but it's definitely been one of my most difficult classes. I would say my favorite class, and I would probably say the easiest, is immunology, because I love learning about the defense mechanisms of the body. I never knew how amazing our body actually is until I took that class, and learning how the body will do certain things in order to save you from infection or in order to cure itself from a disease, and kind of, in a way, block you from even noticing that it's there. So we have lots of like lines of defense, such as like the skin and B cells and T cells, humoral immunity, innate immunity, adaptive immunity. It's so many systems that all work together in order to defend your body. So it's pretty amazing. That's why I love it.
Thanks, Lauren.
So my most challenging class is probably also biochemistry. Like she said, it just goes like really in depth. I do find it kind of interesting, but it does take a lot of work. I spend a few hours every day on it. I have two classes to say for my most interesting, just because one is not exactly pharmacy related. So I did mention that now I'm in a Spanish class for the health professions, and it's really cool because we kind of all get to like talk amongst ourselves, and like we essentially like play doctor. I feel like every day in class, like one person plays the doctor and one person plays the patient, and we just get to learn a lot of Spanish terminology that we would use in the medical field, and that's something that I really want to incorporate in my career. So I really enjoy that. Um, Another class that I really like is dosage forms, actually. I've worked in a pharmacy which is actually a professional class, so because my circumstances like really weird. I've worked in a pharmacy for 3 years now, so having that professional class kind of like makes everything click together, like kind of why I've been doing certain things. I learn from the pharmacists and the pharmacy technicians. They tell me to do this and they tell me to do that, but like I never really knew why. But now that I'm taking, classes that actually pertain to pharmacy, it kind of just like allows it all to click in my head, and it's kind of fun.
Thanks. So one thing I did want to mention, so Lauren and Mackenzie both went through the application process to pharmacy school recently, and both were successfully admitted. So just wanted to give them a quick shout out and a congratulations. So Mackenzie mentioned working in a pharmacy, and that is part of your curriculum. So for the PharmD program, during your first year, either half of the class does it in the fall, half of the class does it in the spring, you will actually work in Purdue's pharmacy. And we are really unique and very fortunate to have a retail pharmacy on our campus and in our building. The majority of pharmacy schools do not have their own pharmacy. And our pharmacy supplies medications to faculty, staff, students, and the surrounding community. So we meaning the admissions committee to pharmacy school, does not have any expectation that students have ever had any type of retail pharmacy experience to be a competitive candidate. If you do have experience like Mackenzie has, that is amazing. And that's going to allow you to talk intelligently about that in an interview. That's going to give you some great shadowing experience, but you do not have to have any of that to be a competitive candidate. Liz, are you in PUP right now, or did you do it last semester? Do you want to talk about that? Sorry, PUP stands for Purdue University Pharmacy.
Yeah, I took it last semester. I got it out of the way, which is kind of nice. So I don't have to do it with therapeutics. But it's a pretty low stress class. It really is. The professor for it, he's extremely nice and understanding. I went in with absolutely zero knowledge of community pharmacy or any experience outside of just shadowing. But by the end of it, you basically know how the medications are dispensed within our pharmacy. You learn how to counsel patients, and you actually do get the chance to go up front and counsel actual patients who are coming to pick up their prescription. You get to fill prescriptions, you answer phones. So you're basically getting the feel of what a community retail pharmacy is like, which I had no idea it was so in depth and confusing. It really is busy. It flies by, the class does. And that's also the class where you start learning drug lists. So you'll have little quizzes every week. about different categories of drugs and their side effects and their regular doses and their dosage forms. So I really enjoyed the class. That's kind of a class that introduces you into like, is community pharmacy an option for you, or is it something that you don't want to do? Which is kind of nice that you get to learn that early. But it's a really fun course to take. It is.
So you had mentioned about getting to counsel patients. So little side note, my daughter is a freshman at Purdue right now. And so she transferred her prescriptions to the Purdue pharmacy. And I went with her the first time to pick them up, just to say hi to people. And normally when I've gone to, I don't know, any other community pharmacy to pick up a prescription, they hand it to you and say, do you have any questions? Usually it's no, and you're on your way. In the Purdue pharmacy, they are trained they open the bottle, they show you the pill, they spend a good quality time with you as a patient. I had never had that kind of experience before, and it was amazing. It encouraged my daughter to ask questions, and normally she's like, nope, and just leaves. And it was such a nice personal experience. And I thought, keep coming back here. This is nice. So you really do get a lot of training, and you've got a supervisor right next to you walking you through it. So if you make a mistake, it's just fine. They're not just sending you out there to just kind of figure it out on your own. You have supervisors and older students to kind of help along the way. So I think that's a really good segue to careers. I think if I were to ask any of you to picture what does a pharmacist look like, I would imagine most of you would say they're in a white coat at a Walgreens or a CVS counting pills. And yes, that is a very common career path. That is probably one of the most common career paths of students when they graduate, is choosing community pharmacy. But there are so many other options that I didn't even know existed until I started working in pharmacy. So if I could ask you three today, because you may change your mind 17 more times before you graduate, but today, what do you think you want to do with your degree?
I want to go into nuclear pharmacy. So that's one that a lot of people just don't hear of until they get into the professional program. And that is a route where you take additional classes, and by the time you graduate, you have a certification where you can go and work in a nuclear pharmacy. Nuclear pharmacy is like community pharmacy in that you are preparing like you're preparing a kit. It just so happens that this kit is radioactive, but you do not see patients. It's set up like a lab. You have clean rooms, you have laminar flow hoods, and you go and you compound, but what you're compounding is radioactive. And then that gets shipped to hospitals usually, or clinics where they're doing diagnostic imaging that requires a radioligand. So that is what I'm interested in right now. I have taken the first elective for it, and I found it super interesting, so I'm excited to learn more about that career.
Thank you.
I am a PP2, so I'm still kind of open to everything, but I know personally I value the patient-pharmacist relationship. So I value talking to patients, how they're doing, how's their day, what they need to do in order to take the drug properly and effectively. So I definitely say I'm interested in ambulatory care or hospital pharmacy, but I'm kind of keeping my eyes open to see what other options are open or are there at least. So I'd probably
Lauren,
say
can you talk a little bit about what ambulatory care is?
I wish I knew more information, but
help if you need help, but if you want to talk a little bit about like what do you like about it and what drew you to it?
Oh yes, definitely. So I'd probably say what I value is seeing the difference in my patients as they come back more and more, but I wish I knew more. I don't have enough experience.
Okay, and that's totally fine. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
An ambulatory care pharmacist works under the direction of a physician, and they have actually their own patients. So very independent from like a typical pharmacist that you would picture at a Walgreens or a CVS. So they are usually working in a clinic or in a hospital seeing their own patients. And the type of patients they see are typically those that need their medication regulated often. A perfect example would be a diabetic patient. They are constantly checking their blood sugar. They are constantly looking at medications and how do we need to change this and how is this working? And so if Lauren were to pursue ambulatory pharmacy, she would have her own set of patients and she would have that autonomy of creating that relationship and actually having her own patients. So that's just to kind of give you a background a little bit about what that means. Mackenzie, do you want to talk a little bit about what your future might look like?
So I mentioned, that I have wanted to be a pharmacist since I was 7 because of my uncle. So I have always wanted to go into oncology pharmacy, which is kind of a branch off of ambulatory care. My ideal dream would be working in like a cancer clinic or a radiation clinic. That would be like the coolest thing ever to me. Of course, I haven't gone through the program, so I do know that things change a lot. I work with 2 professional students back at home, and they will say that they've changed their mind like 16 times. So I realize that it's probably going to change, but that's where I see myself right now. One other area that I've kind of sparked an interest in. So I work at the VA hospital down in Indianapolis. And so there's a lot of veterans that I work with that have an opioid addiction. And that's really kind of opened my eyes to like the opioid crisis. And so that's something that I've become really passionate about, that I never really knew anything about until I worked there. So that's definitely something that I would consider looking into.
Nice. And you had mentioned, McKenna, well, I think we all kind of mentioned that it's fluid in terms of students think that they want this path, and then you take a class and you learn about something, or you have an experience or an internship and you learn about something else, and you're like, oh, that's cool, that's cool. So the neat thing about a PharmD is it is a generalist degree. When you graduate with your PharmD, you can practice as a licensed pharmacist, registered pharmacist. If you want to specialize, you can absolutely do that too. You can do that by doing a residency. You can do that by doing some sort of an internship or a summer experience. So you do not have to know on day 1 of pharmacy school what you want to do when you graduate. You have plenty of time to think about that and get different experiences. So during your 4th year of pharmacy school, you're not in the class anymore. You are all out on rotations, meaning you're like on the job training. So your 4th year of pharmacy school is 10 month-long rotations. And you can choose then to learn about ambulatory care or hospital pharmacy or nuclear pharmacy, and you get exposed to a lot of those different areas. And Purdue offers lots of interesting rotation sites. The majority of them are going to be in the state of Indiana because that's where we're located. But we also offer some international. So we have a rotation in Kenya. We have a rotation in Colombia. We have a rotation in the United Kingdom. I know this isn't international, but we have a rotation in Alaska. So some really cool opportunities to not only experience different types of pharmacy, but also kind of get out and see the world too. So if I could ask Mrs. Eberhard, do you mind talking a little bit about the learning community and maybe share a little bit about what that even is and what that means and what students get out of that?
Sure. So Purdue offers basically 2 different kinds of living learning communities. They can either be based off of major, which is what ours is, or they can be grouped together based on interest. So pre-pharmacy students tend to gravitate towards ours, and pharmaceutical sciences students tend to gravitate towards another learning community called the Data Mine, and that one is for students who are interested in doing research. So both of them great options. Ours doesn't have any additional really requirements to it, whereas the Data Mine, there's a required course that you take associated that talks about how do you gather research data, how do you interpret that data, and then use it for publishing. So that's the 2 main differences. So for us, we work with 1st-year freshmen in the undergraduate program, and our goal is to give you a place where you can talk with other pharmacy students, but also explore pharmacy kind of in a different way. So we bring in speakers sometimes, we do compounding lab activities. So this semester we did a compounding experience In the professional program lab downstairs in our building, the students got to compound what's called a troche. It's essentially a long-lasting lozenge that you would prescribe for a patient. And professional students actually don't get to do that normally in labs. So our P4s that we had join us, they had done it out on their rotation experiences and brought that back as an experience for our first year students. So really cool experience there. And we also do a lot of just gathering time normally in non-COVID. We do like weekly floor dinners just to give you a chance to talk with us. It's myself and a faculty member, Jane Kraus, who's one of your Farm 100 instructors. So it's just a really good chance to kind of network, and you'll also have her for farm calculations as a P1. So it's a good chance to just kind of connect with a faculty person too. And that can provide you lots of good bonus opportunities down the road for sure.
So I was actually in a learning community freshman year. I was in the pre-pharmacy learning community, and I loved it. It was kind of like a foot in the door kind of thing. Like I didn't know anyone coming to, I had one friend who came to Purdue, but she was engineering, so we were totally different routes. And it just like allowed me to like be surrounded with people in my major, and it was kind of fun. Like we would all study for exams together, and we'd walk to exams together. The only downfall was we all came back from exams at the same time, so showers were always full after exams. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I don't know if the RA is still the same, but I had Juliet and she was amazing. She still is in contact with us. And yeah, there's like a lot of opportunities that it opens up just to learn more about the program.
And Juliet has moved up ranks, so she's now a supervisor for our RAs, but we still get to communicate with her. She is a great resource still for students. We do invite her to come and join us as well. So there's always a chance to mingle with upperclassmen and kind of pick their brains, because there's a difference in, talking to the students versus talking to us as staff and faculty. So it's just a good experience overall, and I'm glad that Mackenzie enjoyed it too.
An interesting story that I heard, and I don't know if this is really true or not, but in the learning community, you are all obviously you're living together, very similar course schedule. And like Mackenzie said, everybody walks to exams together. So I had heard a few years ago, there was a big, I don't know, biology test, let's say, and it was early morning and they're all the students are standing in the lobby getting ready to walk to the exam. And they look around and notice Susie's not here. Because they're in this learning community, they know and remembered who's here and who's not here. So somebody goes up and knocks on Susie's door. She had slept through her alarm. They got her up and she didn't miss the exam because of the learning community. So that's just kind of one benefit to having that group of like-minded, similar goals, everybody together under one roof. The flip side of that is, and I've heard from students say, I have enough pharmacy from all my classes. I need some non-pharmacy friends and I'm not going to do the learning community. And that is just fine too. There is no right or wrong or best way to do it. It's just an option available to you if that's something you're interested in.
And I'll chime in just to say, even though we host events as the learning community, we do open our events to anyone that's interested. So if you're not part of the learning community or part of a different learning community and you're still interested in attending our events, we're always advertising those to students. So you're always welcome to join no matter what.
Thank you, Mrs. Eberhard. I want to just pause for a second. We've been doing a lot of talking. Are there any questions out there? Does anybody want to unmute and ask or put a question in the chat that you were curious about? Maybe something the students talked about earlier that maybe you want them to expand a little bit more on, or something that we could clarify for you. Please feel free to do that and take advantage of our amazing resources here tonight to share this information with you. While you guys are thinking about questions, I'm going to ask our students to talk a little bit about what study skills do you use? What time management skills do you use to be successful? And maybe some advice that you have to students that are currently in high school.
So my biggest way to manage my time is with an agenda or a planner. That way I can make sure I don't miss anything like a meeting or an appointment that I have. It kind of helps you integrate your school life and your non-school life and your responsibilities for each. also on my laptop, I'll like put little sticky notes on my desktop. That's a function on Macs and other PCs where you can like put a digital sticky note for reminders. I've started doing that. That helps you, not keep everything scrambled up in your head. As far as study techniques, I really tried to get into Quizlet and it just didn't work for me. All of these students are using Quizlet to memorize drugs, and I'm just like, it doesn't work for me. I tried. So I tend to like to get like printer paper or a sheet of legal paper or something that I can write on and make like concept maps. And I'll make charts and I'll put like little bubbles of things that I have trouble remembering. And for me, that really just helps me sort through all the material and figure out what I don't know and what I do know really well. Because once you like make a concept chart, I like to like remake it from memory and see if I can remember everything. So that really helps for me. I recommend trying it. I feel like concept maps are one of those things that like you get introduced to you at like the beginning of high school as a study technique, and you're like, I'm not going to do that. That'll take too much time. It is a little more time intensive way of studying, but I think in the long run it really works.
I would also say an agenda or some type of schedule is a great way, because with pharmacy, the deadlines kind of never end. You're going to have a lot of work and a lot of things due, as well as exams to study for at the same time. So it's always good to have an agenda and plan out your day for each day, and maybe plan out tasks for each day. I know I always like to put sticky notes on my laptop for what I need to complete for that day, and I do it every morning, or else I'll miss deadlines. But I know for me, sometimes study time is hard for me to get in. I'm being so busy and having classes and lectures to go to. So I would say plan out your study times for each subject that you're going to have. And that helps a lot as well. Plan out maybe an hour of this, take a break, maybe a couple hours of that, depending on what you need, how much you need to study for each class. I know that helps a lot for me. So.
Like what they both said, agendas. I've never met a pharmacy student who doesn't use an agenda. I kind of just thought that was a normal thing at this point. You just can't remember it all. Like there's a million things to do every day. You just have to keep track. One thing I've started doing this semester, which I actually have next to me, I literally like map out like the times of my day, like when I have to work or when I have class or something, and it kind of just helps me like view the whole thing. I don't know, I'm kind of weird. Study wise, I find it useful to look. A lot of professors post like their slides or something beforehand. I usually go through and take like initial notes on that so that I have a general idea of what they're talking about during lecture. And then during lecture, I can kind of just build on that and pay attention to any details that they mention, or just like ways that they explain different things. One benefit in that is when you are looking at it beforehand, you already know what you know and what you don't know. And so for things you don't know, you can know to pay a little bit more attention or ask a question or ask your classmates, anything like that. I also can't get into Quizlet. I don't know why. I do like concept mapping. Dr. Walter, who is the professor for microbiology, Bio 221, I went to every single one of his review sessions 3 times a week. And he was like a stickler on concept maps. He was like, no flashcards, you need to make a concept map. So that's what kind of got me into that. And I use it for every class now and I love it.
Thank you. I did see the question in the chat about Emerging Leaders Scholarship. And it sounds like no one on the panel is involved in that. But what I will do after this, and I can see who asked the question. So what I will do is I'm going to find some pharmacy students that are involved in the program, and I can try and get you connected that way, maybe through an email, and get you connected to a pharmacy student, if that's helpful. And then was there another question in the chat?
Yeah, there's a student asking about like the pharmaceutical sciences major and then moving on to the professional program. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about how our undergraduate program is structured.
Sure. So the BSPS, the Bachelor of Science in Pharmaceutical Sciences, the first 2 years of that program are almost identical to the first 2 years of pre-pharmacy. So if there is a student that's really kind of on the fence of, gosh, I really like the idea of PharmD, but I also kind of like the idea of drug discovery and drug development, you can stay undecided for a while. During your first semester at Purdue, you will take a class called Pharm 100, and it's an orientation course, and you will learn about all of the different career paths for both pharmaceutical sciences and PharmD. So while you're kind of thinking about those different career paths and which makes more sense to you, you're still taking classes and working towards that goal, whatever that goal may be. And then during your first semester of your second year, you would start the application process to pharmacy school. So even if you're still on the fence at that point, you can apply to pharmacy school and always withdraw your application, or if you get admitted, you can deny and say thanks, but no thanks, I'm more interested in research. And then if you end up pursuing your BSPS and at the end of that go, maybe a pharmacy school is right for me, then you can apply to pharmacy school at that time. So we just ask that you stay very open with your academic advisor and let them know what your plans are and say, gosh, I think this is it, but I've also secretly loved theater and I want to do that too. Whatever your goals are, we want to make sure that you're making progress towards them. So we're going to do whatever we can to make sure as many doors stay open as possible while you're trying to figure all of that out. Does that answer the question? Okay. And I appreciate the questions, so keep them coming because our students are experts. If you guys, we were talking about like courses and study habits and things like that. Could you guys maybe share some advice on your transition from high school to college? Like maybe what worked, what didn't, words of wisdom?
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't super difficult transitioning my study skills, just because I was a stickler for studying in high school, even though I didn't need to be. Looking back, I probably should have studied less. It probably would have been more helpful, but I kind of learned how to study in high school. There's a few things I learned to adjust, which is you're not going to be able to finish everything on your to-do list in one night. So over the course of the week and over the course of the day, you're going to be having lists of things you hope to get done that day. In high school, I was able to cross all those off in one evening. You can't do that when you're in pharmacy school. You got to spread it out over the week. So that was the biggest learning curve for me in terms of studying. Usually you also have to integrate multiple study habits into one class. And find what works. If you're having a quiz, you might be studying differently than for an exam for that class. And that was another thing that I had to learn. But yeah, I think start learning your study techniques early, figure out what works for you. And then once you find it, don't be swayed into another way of studying like Quizlet, like me and Mackenzie. If you don't like it and it doesn't work for you, then it's not going to work, even if it works for other people.
Thank you, Liz.
I definitely agree with Liz. I do have to say I am one of those people who use Quizlet. It's great for memorization, but I definitely think a lot of the classes in pharmacy, it's more than just memorization. It's more like applying it to real life or applying it more to the class when you're given certain circumstances. So I probably say for me, I definitely had to study a lot more. I think I had it very easy in high school. And of course, at the time I was like, oh my gosh, this is so hard, when really it's not. So I had to learn basically what Liz said, what works for me, and combining those ways that are good to study and using it in the classes for exams or for quizzes, it helps a lot. I know I kind of use the fact that I'm an auditory learner. People are different types of learning. Some people learn by hearing, some people learn by repeating it, some people learn by writing it. I know I had to read a lot of my notes out loud, so to help me memorize it and help me absorb it and actually able to recall it easily. So I would say definitely find what works for you, and also figure out what type of learner you are. I think that helps a lot as well.
I agree with a lot of things both of them said. One big thing that I found with Quizlet, I like I'm not like bashing Quizlet, like again, like it works for some people. This is just what I found. Um, I have never taken a pharmacy class that you just have to memorize something. Oftentimes you have to memorize it and understand how it works and understand how to apply it and things like that. And with Quizlet, I was one to just like, oh, if I got the card right, like that's done. I don't need to look at that anymore. So you have to kind of incorporate a lot of different study habits. I was a studier in high school, but it was definitely a change. Coming to college, there's some things that work that they did in high school. There's some things that don't. One thing I didn't really discover worked for me until like late sophomore year, early this year, is going to not all of, a lot of office hours and help sessions and SI sessions. So SI stands for supplemental instruction, and they have it for like 100 and 200 level classes. And it's just an undergraduate student like us, who helps you with the course, helps you with study habits, things like that. TAs, like they're amazing. I mean, they can vary, but like I have one this semester that has helped me with everything. She's so good. She's like, email me if you don't understand something. Like I can send you my notes. Like you don't know the resources unless you get out there. With professors, one unique thing about pharmacy, is for a lot of pharmacy classes, there's multiple professors for the classes. A lot of them are involved in research, and so they kind of teach their area of expertise and then move on to the next one. So if you go to an office hour at the beginning of the semester with a professor and you don't really like the teaching method or something, don't give up on it, because the next professor you might really well understand and you might really benefit from going to their office hours.
Awesome. Really good advice, you guys, all of you. So I just reread that question about the pharmaceutical sciences. Let me clarify a little something that I think I did not touch on earlier. All of our new incoming students are admitted to pharmaceutical sciences. Whether you're interested in the BSPS or the PharmD, everybody comes into Purdue under the title of pharmaceutical sciences. Then over the summer, you will meet with your academic advisor. You will talk about, well, I think I really want the pre-pharmacy PharmD route, or maybe I really want the BSPS route, or maybe I want to stay open to both. And you guys will talk about that during your first advising session. And then based on that conversation, we will then internally code you as either pre-pharmacy or BSPS or both. So that probably is a little bit confusing sometimes to students who think, well, I'm pre-pharmacy, but it says pharmaceutical sciences. Yes, that's for everybody. And then we'll clarify a little bit later down the road what your true educational goal is. Okay, so we only have about 10 minutes left. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put in the chat the email address that comes to me. If you guys have questions, maybe you're too shy to ask, maybe you think about it and you come up with a question an hour from now. So I'm gonna put that email in the chat. While I'm doing that, if I could ask the students to talk a little bit about what you're involved in. We've talked a lot about academics and studying. You all have fun too, right? So talk a little bit about what you're involved in and what you guys do for fun.
So along the lines of clubs, I'm in Purdue Pharmacy Ambassadors, which is who's hosting this event. And I'm the director of recruitment for that. I'm also the fundraising chair for PSSHP, which is the Purdue Student Society of Health System Pharmacists. So that is a Purdue student-led club that is under the I guess the regulation is overseen by ASHP, which is the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. So we connect with that organization and host events, and that club really teaches you about the different career paths that you can find within pharmacy. And I really love being the fundraising chair because that's something that like is totally unrelated to pharmacy and really helps you build people skills. And you know, for each of those clubs, it's hard to meet because of COVID. So you know, this semester and the fall semester was a little different because of that. we haven't been able to have as much fun as we did last semester, but it's still a way to get connected with other students and, take a break from your studies. I'm also part of the Lilly Scholars Network, which holds fun events for those who get the Lilly Scholarship, if that's a thing in your county, if you're from Indiana. Outside of school, I really just I like reading for fun, not reading textbooks or anything, just, getting away from academic reading for a while. I like hiking, going out in nature, taking a break. So like to do that on the weekends, and jogging. It kind of helps with the stress. So I would recommend picking up an activity that helps you de-stress and breathe a little when you're overwhelmed.
Thank you, Liz.
I am involved in, I believe, 3 other clubs. So there's PPA, and then I'm also in the Black Voices of Inspiration because I love to sing. So we rehearse every Monday, and it's just a good place to find release and make beautiful music with other people. I love being around them, and I love my choir director. So they my extracurriculars give me a break from all the intense studying. The second thing I'm in is Ultimate Frisbee. I love sports, so Ultimate Frisbee really lets me let my anger out, my anger and my frustrations, but I also get to forge a bond with amazing women who are also in difficult majors. So we kind of all struggle together, but when we practice, it's a whole new dynamic, and the connections we make on the field is unlike any other. The last thing I'm in is Boiler Track, so it's another type of recruitment program. I haven't been as much involved since COVID hit and there hasn't been many events, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they bring. I haven't done much, but I'm looking forward to it. But those kind of provide me release and allow me to kind of, I guess you could say, let my hair down. Because since pharmacy is so stressful, you're going to need those extracurriculars to kind of balance everything out for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Lauren.
I'm in a couple other pharmacy organizations other than PPA, which, like Liz said, is the one who's hosting this event. Though I think I know what I want to go into. You really don't know. So I'm involved in a couple of different areas. I'm in the veterinary pharmacy club, the oncology pharmacy club, pediatric pharmacy club, as well as nuclear pharmacy club. It's kind of a lot, but I think it's more beneficial because you get to learn about different areas. And so you kind of have a leg up on those who don't really know anything about it when you start learning about it. Like they both said, it's nice to have something that's not pharmacy related, because it does get overwhelming and you see the same people all the time, and sometimes you just need a break from it. I volunteer at our animal shelter. It's a little off campus. It's called Natalie's Second Chance. I love it. I walk dogs on weekend mornings, and it's that's my therapy, and I love it. I also have an on-campus job at a residence hall, and that I just started that this semester, and I absolutely love it. We have so much fun. It's with other students. We're all, studious, and we just have so much fun together, and it's awesome. So definitely get involved in pharmacy organizations, but also do things that aren't pharmacy related because it does get to be a little overwhelming.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing all of your wisdom and your knowledge and your advice. It is invaluable. And I want to thank everyone here in the audience for spending the evening with us and getting to know us a little bit better, asking your questions. If you have any final questions, we can hang out for a little bit, but that is the end of the content that we have to share with you guys tonight. So again, thank you. Hail Purdue, and let us know if you have additional questions. I feel like I should have the fight song playing at the end as everybody's leaving.
I know this feels really awkward.
I know.
That would be a really good idea.
I should do that next time. Blaine, you were the one that had the question about the emerging leaders. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna contact our contact in our college and get you some names to see if you can connect with a current student in the program, just so you can ask questions that we just aren't able to answer for you.
All right, so do you want me to leave my email in the chat or?
Sure, yeah, that would be great, actually. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you, Blaine. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I always appreciate every time I do one of these, I learn something new. And Lauren, well, all three of you, your enthusiasm about your classes. I mean, Lauren, when you were talking about immunology, you were like out of your seat. I was like, that's so cool.
You
I
said
just-
way
I
better
love
things
it.
about biochem than I could have. You're like, it's really cool to learn this. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh my gosh.
gosh.
I told myself in that class. Terrible.
Mhm.
And Liz, I really appreciated your description of therapeutics. That is so helpful the way you described it, because I think a lot of times students hear what it's about, but they don't always totally get it. So that was really helpful.
It's definitely a learning curve, that's for sure. It's a
Yeah,
it's a class unlike any other class on Purdue's campus, I guarantee it.
yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.